Hi everybody, welcome back. I'm Dave Forrest. I'm here to, on the next project here, we finished the Sherman in the last series of videos, and now we're on to the Tamiya Brummbar. So just a couple of notes. So again, as we kind of mentioned in the intro video, so this particular model is going to be, we're going to use mission model paints. And I've done a little bit of work. I think the last time anybody saw this, I just primed it. And what I like to use for a primer is I typically use Mr. Surfacer 1200 thin 50/50 with the Gunsey leveling thinner. And then what I've done is I've gone through and I've pre-shaded. And pre-shading is a bit of a controversial technique, particularly on armored vehicles. You could do a lot of, there's the black and white pre-shading that some modelers do to kind of set up the tonal varieties, and they spray more translucent coats to kind of keep those tonal varieties in place. So that's one option. Not something I've done in the past, but I can see there's some beautiful examples of how that can work well. So the reason why I do some pre-shading is twofold. So one is I like to try and create some shadows and depth. And that's really the reason why you would pre-shade. And it allows me to get into to spend a little bit more time getting into areas that might be difficult with the base color going forward. So when I'm pre-shading, typically what I use is I use a mix of Tamiya colors. So I use the XF10 brown, flat brown, and the XF1 flat black, and I mix that and I thin that probably 40%, so 50 of each, and then 40% paint to thinner, and I'll thin with I think in this case I just use the X20 and alcohol to thin it. And I can spray it on, and the nice thing about going up, so like for example, this area here, it's kind of a hard area to get in. So we're in between kind of the main hull and this toolbox here. Might be hard to get the base color in there. So if you're trying to spray base color and you're trying to modulate it, it might be a little bit difficult to get in there. So I'll get in there with the pre-shading. I don't have to worry about being as neat because I'm going to cover up any mistakes or any overspray I might have later on with the base colors. And it just helps create a little bit of shadow in there so that I don't have to hit it completely with the base colors to get rid of the gray. Now I've done the front of the vehicle already, and I've modulated it with 4 different colors. And the only reason why I went to 4 is I found that after using 3 that the lightest color wasn't quite light enough, so I just added a bit of white to it and used that as a 4th color. And really all you're doing, it looks pretty terrible now, and it should look terrible. If it looks terrible, it's a good sign. And by terrible, I mean it looks pretty, I guess, looks pretty gaudy for lack of a better term. And by that I mean it's, you've got a lot of bright parts, you've got some, enhanced shadows, so it looks a little bit exaggerated. And that's what you want. You want the modulation to look like that, because all of the subsequent things you're going to do, all of the filters you're going to put on it, all of the washes you're going to put on it, any streaking, weathering, pigments, etc., are going to serve to tone all of that down. And I find it from experience, it's better to have something that's a little bit too strong and a little bit too contrast, because it's a lot easier to tone it down. You have all kinds of tricks you can do to tone it down, filters, washes, etc. But if you don't make it, you don't make it stand out this much, you don't make it that stark, it's hard to bring back. So what happens is if it's a little bit more muted than this, then all of your other subsequent effects go in and they kind of mute the modulation, they kind of take it away. And then at that point, it's very difficult to kind of bring back the any subtleties that you want to bring back. You could do it with oils and whatnot, but it's just a much easier process if you start very strong and you can tone down. A lot easier to do. So what we're going to do in this video is we're going to go through the rest of the vehicle here and just spray the base color on and start modulating. Now on the underside of the vehicle, because this is a late war vehicle, and I don't have any any evidence of this. So this is a largely artistic license, but I've painted it in the primer red, and I'm going to leave it in the primer red. Now, with all the weathering and the mud and everything that we're going to put underneath on the bottom of this, probably not a lot of this is going to remain, but some of it will show through. So I think that's a kind of a neat little feature for this thing, just to add some different color to it, some variety to it. The other thing that's fair to mention too, and I think I've mentioned this in previous videos, is that this is this is the Tamiya kit. It's a late war model. Some of these late model Brummars had Zimmer and some didn't. So I'm depicting one that didn't. And the reason for that is to be honest, I'm too lazy. Didn't want to have to deal with putting Zimmer on it. Didn't want to have to resort to the stickers, or didn't want to have to put my own on it, or wait for Attack or some other third party to come up with a set for it. And I really wanted to use this as a bit of a modulation project for multicolor camp. So in this one we're going to have the yellow base color, and then we're going to have red, brown, and green on it as well. We'll do that in another video, in a subsequent video. So for today, we're just going to focus on the base color, applying the base color, and modulating that. And what we're going to see is that as we modulate on the base color, that modulation is going to serve as a foundation for modulating the camouflage colors on there. So as we spray a swath of green here, of olive green for example, and let's say it comes up over this, well, we know that this part here, if it's covered in green, is going to be a lighter tinge of green than perhaps this part here. So this kind of serves as a bit of a mapping exercise for any of the other camouflage colors to come. So as mentioned, we're using mission model paints. Again, a great product that I was hesitant to make the investment in yet another line of paints, but these are very easy to work with. And again, you do have to use their products to thin. So you've got to use their thinner, and you've got to use this is an additive, polyurethane mix additive, which acts as I think a bit of a hardener, and has some leveling properties as well. But if you try and use a different type of thinner with this, like for example, if you're trying to use the leveling thinner, which is my go-to thinner, I love that. I love that stuff. The paint just clumps up, and it's not a good experience at all. So stick with their products, and the other thing too is you have to clean the airbrush with their products as well. So after we do the spraying, we'll use this thinner here to go through and clean out the airbrush for next time. I've also mixed, so I've taken the trouble of mixing some of the shades. So the colors we're going to use on this is for the darkest shade, it's a mix of the, let me find it here. So it's a mix of the Dunkelgelb, which is MMP 011, and black. And the reason for that was just to give it a bit of a darker tone. Then the next base tone is just simply this out of the bottle, the Dunkelgelb out of the bottle. And then they make another color, which is, so it's another Dunkelgelb, but I guess there was different tones and varieties of Dunkelgelb as paint stocks ran out and different manufacturers got involved in providing them. And this is Dunkelgelb late 1944, which is MMP 019. So that's the next color. And then all I did for the fourth highlight color, pardon me, was use this 1944 Dunkelgelb and added a few drops of white to it to create this, the lightest colors that you see here. So these little, you can buy these separately. These are little paint jars or plastic paint dispensers that have a ball bearing in them already. So great for pre-mixing, so that way I don't have to worry about remembering what ratio I did. I'm not very good at kind of writing down the ratios that I use. I just kind of really mix it until it looks right, and then I'll put it into something like this so that I can get at it later. So I think that's about it for the prep. So I think what we'll do is we'll get some paint loaded into the airbrush, and we'll start spraying. Okay, so I've got the dark color loaded into my airbrush here. I'm spraying with an Iwata Eclipse HPCS. This is my favorite go-to airbrush. It has a 0.3 millimeter needle in it. I'm spraying anywhere between 15 and 20 psi, probably closer to 15. I like to keep the pressure low. And the consistency of the paint. So I've got so this already has it's obviously already thinned, and it already has a bit of the Mission Models additive to it. And you really want to get it to the point where it kind of runs up the side of the cup, like so. So kind of like a thick milk, I guess. So now we got that loaded, we'll just start spraying. And what I'm doing is I'm just going to start working in the middle of the various panels. So we'll look at this crew hatch here, and just start filling in the gray, the primer. Right, and we'll go to the next one. Same type of thing. You can see how the pre-shading underneath is starting to fade away. Gonna work in here. And it's just spraying in very light coats. Kind of bouncing around here. For me, painting is a very random process. You can see as I'm hitting this, you can see the pre-shading on these bolts up here are starting to fade, which is good. Now, one thing I didn't mention in the intro, so an alternative to pre-shading for me is, I think you've got a few options. So one is you can not pre-shade at all and just go with your base colors, paint them on, and modulate. And I think as we get to the end of this, I might question the investment of time that I made in the pre-shading and see if it was really worth it or not. Two, you can pre-shade as I've done and try and keep some of the pre-shading in place through the layer of colors. Now it becomes increasingly difficult to do as you're putting different colors onto the tank. So for example, I think pre-shading works. It's a lot easier to maintain if it's just one color, like a Panzer Gray, or if there was no red, brown, or green on this tank. Or it's certainly or on a olive drab vehicle or something. I think that might be a little bit easier. But as you're layering on other colors on top of the base coat or the base color, you tend to lose that. And then something that I've used in the past, and it's what I used on the Sherman, is just to prime everything black. That's good too, because that allows you to kind of build the colors up. But I was afraid to use black on this one because of the light color. So black I'd feel more comfortable using on a olive drab or a Panzer Gray vehicle. On something that's yellow, the black, I'm not sure. You might have to work a little bit hard to get the, especially because I like to spray in translucent coats, to get the yellow color to really stick. So I'll work on that. So you see very light coats, like you're not covering everything in one go. Right, you're just kind of working it around. Just make sure all of the gray is gone. Kind of just start taking down. So example here, there's a bit of a dark bit of pre-shading. I probably want to cut that back, so I'll just work on just cutting that back with the base coat. You can see it's starting to fade already. But that's the nice thing about doing it, using the translucent coats, is that it allows you some subtlety. Make sure we get that periscope down. Now this has a moving. This plate up here moves with this is brilliant engineering by Tamiya. So just make sure you move it around and you get all of the little bits there. See in there, I'm just cutting back some of that pre-shading. It's starting to fade as I get color on it. starting to look good. Some of this rear area here. And you can see the paint dries pretty quick. So if I wanted to jump to the next color right away, I really don't have to use a hairdryer or anything to accelerate the drying time, because it's already pretty dry. And, you know, there's really nothing in the way of fumes to worry about. So I'd say that top part of the hull here, I think is pretty much done. Okay. So I think that's good for now. So what I might do, let's actually move this back. Like so, see we exposed an area here that I've got to get to. See, these articulating things are always a bit of a challenge. Make sure that I think we're good there. Now maybe we'll do the side here, and I think I've raved about this model in the past, but I'll do it again. The cast texture that they have. So this, I didn't do anything to this. All the cast texture that you see here is all plastic. It's all molded. So normally what I would do is I would go in with some Mr. Surfacer and stipple it and put it on to create some better cast texture, but this is all from the kit. Really just a beautifully put together model. One of Tamiya's finest, I think. And you can see here where actually I sort of airbrushed in some streaks. So we'll see how much of that actually remains after we do the base color on there, the dark shade color. But that's an option too. I mean, you can kind of go in there and creating the final effect of a model is really all about layering. So this is like the very first layering of the weathering that you would do. Now, how much of this is going to remain after we spray remains to be seen. It might be all for nothing, but at least it's there. So as I'm trying to spray this, we'll try and preserve that. So I'm just working very light coats. You can still see that beautiful cast texture is still there. Now, because of these shirts and holders are in the way, you kind of have to manipulate, kind of spray down a little bit, but not insurmountable. So you can see there's still some remnants of the streaking. So hopefully we'll keep that in place with the subsequent colors. But my guess is we'll probably lose a fair bit of that. So I don't know, but we'll try and keep it there. sure we're getting at the inside of the holders as well. Start doing this a little bit back here. Get back on the engine deck. Back in here. So you see what I do is I'll kind of spray paint on I'll put color on the gray area outside of the pre-shading and then work my way out to the edges. Like so. Sorry, I keep moving this around on Robert there, making it even more challenging to keep this in camera. I'll stop doing that, Robert. Grills. The nice thing about this kit is it really, just like their Yak Panzer 4 Lang, you know, you could really a nice kit to build out of the box. With these types of grills, you don't need the mesh on top, or they didn't have the mesh on top. So if you're looking for a nice out of the box build, really highly recommend this kit. You see now we'll start just knocking back the pre-shading that's along the panel lines here. That's coming out nicely. Sorry, I'm going to get us back in the light. Let's try and do that area back here. Move my chair a bit so I can position myself a little better. So again, spraying on relatively low air pressure. As I depress this, I'm probably closer to 15 than 15 or 16 psi as I'm spraying here. I just find it's the best for just getting a controlled amount of color on. Oh, let's go back and do this one here. I'm going to get that back in the light. How about that? There we go. So you can see it's really an awful color yellow. Go back up top. Maybe down here. Well, actually, I might just get a little bit. Just make sure a little bit more color down here. And let's spray it. Okay, so let's maybe hit the other side. So I've got this tow cable in here, so I'm just going to paint it in place as well. Again, the same thing, try and keep some of those streaks in place. Sorry, Robert. Keep moving around again. There we go. Now maybe what I'll do is I'll finish spraying the rest of this off camera. But you get the idea for the base color, or I guess the darkest shade that you're using. Don't forget, you're going to have another 3 colors over this, so it doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to be. You know, you want some of the pre-shading underneath to show through, ideally. So I think here, that to me looks about right. So I'll work on doing the rest of this off camera. So for the base color, real quick, and then we'll start doing the second highlight color, or the second color of the modulation on the top, and work around.
Yeah, this is a little bit challenge to painting and filming together.
Are you taping or? Oh, okay. Oops. So here I'm just going over just finishing up the base color. And forgot to mention here on the, let's shut this off and I'll talk for a few minutes. Give that a bit of a rest. So here, so you got to think about where do you want to invest effort. So when I'm doing the bottom, or the the lower hull here, there's going to be a lot of dirt and mud on this, so I'm not going to worry too much about modulating this or getting in there and painting every little thing or whatnot. The nice thing about the Tamiya kits is, again, because of all of the the poly caps that you have, you can pull the wheels on and off fairly easily. So I'd love to take, it's a lot easier to get at things with the wheels off and take advantage of that. The kit does come with rubber band tracks, which I hate. Hate. Sorry, that's a bit of a strong word. Don't really work well for this particular kit because these Panzer IV chassis, the tracks would have a bit of a sag in them. It's kind of hard to replicate with a rubber band. They're great for Sherman tanks because the tracks are live, but maybe not so much for the Panzer IV chassis. So I've got a set of aftermarket tracks by Kaizen that I'm going to be putting together, and we'll do a separate episode on all of that. But those are off the vehicle, so you can get at these things. But again, I won't spend too much time worrying about getting a perfect modulation job in here because it's all going to be covered up with mud and gunk and streaking and pigments and everything. So you'll see very little of the underlying color, anyways. We'll put some in there, but don't have to spend a lot of time on it. The same thing with the underside. Again, I mentioned earlier I went with the primer red here, and we're not going to spend a lot of time modulating it because it's all going to get lost because there's going to be so much mud and stuff under it. So I'm going to finish putting the base color on here, and then we'll get to the next shade. So we finished putting on the shade color or the first color onto the rest of the vehicle here, and as you can see, or as hopefully you can see, that there's still some of the pre-shading that's showing through, which is good. So hopefully we can continue to preserve that through the subsequent layers of color. Now we're on to the next color, which is simply the Dunkelgelb, which is the MMP 011. And I'm going to mix that straight into the cup here. So what I've done is I put a few drops of thinner. I'm going to put a few drops of paint in here now. Mix it up good. And then I'm going to put in some of the additive. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 drops of that, call it. 6 healthy drops. And I may need to add a little bit more paint. So again, nice thing about these, they've got the rattlers built into the bottles. You just drop it in. And again, you mix it to the consistency of a good not a thick milk, well, I guess a thick milk. So as you run it up the sides, it kind of takes its time coming back down. I think that's good. Okay, put this back in here. Move the tool off. Okay, so we'll start getting in and spraying the second color. Okay, so now, so the same thing as before, you kind of work in the center of the panels. So you're trying to preserve the previous color that you've had on there before. Just working it up. See how the translucent those layers are? You can see already the difference between the color here and the color on this other panel. Right? So I think we're good there. Again, never start spraying on the model because you don't know if you're going to get some splash. I always spray a little bit off and then bring it on. And then the same thing here. See the difference of the color there? Nice. Oh, that's nice. Again, the nice thing about these Mission model paints, they dry fairly quickly. So you're able to get in there. So let's start with these hatches. Again, the same type of thing. You just kind of work from the middle of the panel out. And let's work here. And you're just trying to get the base color. And again, try not, and again, you don't want to obliterate everything else that you've done up to this point in terms of the pre-shading and the previous color. So I think that's probably good enough for there. Let's just a little bit along the edge here. Let's work on this other panel. So the same thing, middle of the panel. I like to spray in very tight circular movements. Just make sure that the spray isn't focused in one area where you would get puddling. That looks pretty good. So getting the base color coat on is probably the most difficult and the hardest, because that's the first layer of cutting. Everything else you do after that gets progressively easier. There we go. So let's maybe work on this side. Let's get closer to the light, so hopefully that shows better on film. And you can see that, again, that beautiful, I can't get over that cast texture. It's the nicest cast texture I think I've seen in an injection kit. It's really quite nice. Let's maybe work on this panel here. Same type of thing, very, just building the color up in the middle, using the circular movements. That's that. On top of this antenna fixture. We're done. Just do the crew access hatch in the back here. Maybe let's move this light behind here, like this. Sorry, Robert. There you go. And again, what I might do is I might leave more of the darker color showing through towards the bottom where shadows would naturally gather. More of the light on top. And again, we'll address this further in subsequent colors, lighter colors. So you can already see the progress that we're making. So we've painted the top part of the fighting compartment here. We haven't done anything on the engine deck yet. But you can see how, you know, there's some color being built up. Now again, because this is a raised piece, I might spend more time putting color on it. This will certainly figure prominently in subsequent colors. Just building it light with nice, like I said, translucent layers. Modeling is all about, or painting anyway, this finishing models is all about building up layers. Whether it's weathering or painting. Go after the grills here on the engine deck. So again, it's starting to look like a Dunkelgelb vehicle. Oh, it's kind of hard that it's shooting against the light. Okay, so I'm just going to continue working on the areas that I haven't gotten to yet. Same type of thing, again, just building up color, start in the middle of the panel. Build it up gradually, try and leave some of that previous shading behind. And we'll do that off camera, and then we'll get to the third color. So I'm just going back and just touching up some areas with the second coat of color. This area here where the jack is a little hard to get at, so just making sure we have enough color built up on it. Starting to look good. And now we're applying the third layer of color, which is the Dunkelgelb 1944. And the same type of thing. working inside the panels. Just rinse and repeat of what we did before. Just work in the center of the panels, build the color out. And again, you want to leave some of that those previous effects in place. And when you're doing some of the vertical panels here, so because this is a horizontal panel, it would catch a lot of light. So I would probably do a little bit more even spraying on this of the lighter colors, just because it's going to catch a lot of natural light. Well, when I start doing, this one here, when we start doing, let's say, this first panel back here, this vertical panel, I'll start at the top, build the color up at the top, and gradually fade it as you work your way down. Similar to what we did on the front here. Okay. So let's start, same type of thing here. So I'm going to build my color up stronger at the top. After a long session of spraying, the finger goes a little numb here. I gotta get one of those trigger ones. A good friend of mine bought one of the Iwata trigger, the TR1s, and I'm waiting for him to try it out to give me some feedback to see if it's how it performs. But I think for a long session like this, working with a trigger might be a little bit more, might make more sense ergonomically, be a little bit more comfortable. But you see, for example, on this side here, see how I leave a lot of the shadow color, that second color down here, that first and second color here. I've got that base color up at the top. And that's really all you have to do. So again, as I said, as you progress through the colors, you've got to put a little bit less paint on it. So let's do the same thing with this. So just work your way on the top. Same type of thing. So you see how now it's starting to look like the front of the vehicle, which has the 4 colors applied. So let's start working on some of these other vertical panels. And we start getting back to the horizontal panels, same type of thing. Again, because this is raised, I'll pay a little bit more attention to this. And just work in the middle, work your way out. The engine grills. Now you see how I might have a little bit more color on this panel from the others. I'm not too worried about that, and I'll make that work for us in terms of creating, similar to what we did on the Sherman, where we had different filters, different filter colors on different panels. Well, kind of the same type of thing. It's not, it's not bad to have something in there that kind of breaks it up. That's maybe a little bit brighter or a little bit darker than the other panels around it. Forget to pay attention to your skirt brackets. You have to pay attention to the fenders here, to the mud guards on the back. Again, same type of thing. Start from off the model. Remember that, Dave? And right. Dry that off a bit. I'm just spraying air on this because I put a lot of color on this one to make sure it doesn't run, but the leveling properties of the additive come into play here, which is good. Again, focus more the light color at the top of the mudguard. Kind of work your way down. Gives that visual interest. Same thing here on the back. I'm going to focus on the top. Here on this little platform here, I'll focus on this and just, and again with all that texture in there, that'll take a wash or a filter real nice. All that detail will just pop out. Just try to catch the areas that would stand out. Right. Maybe just a blending. And again, I might do a bit on the sides here, but again, because it's going to be a lot of mud and whatnot, it's really just, this is a good area to practice in, right? You might want to do this before working on the model so that you can get your technique down, because chances are you're going to cover that with a lot of mud and effects, weathering, whatnot. And you can see here on the sides, I still got a lot of the primer showing through. I'm not too fussed because again there's going to be a lot of mud and buildup and they're going to be hidden largely by the road wheels anyways, so don't sweat the small stuff. Maybe just build a little color inside that panel there. It's a bit of a highlight. And we'll do the same thing maybe inside the turn rollers. Alright, and just maybe a little bit. And in this case you might want to do a little bit opposite where you're kind of, you're working light up, light to dark because of the shadow effect that the fender would have. Oh, can't forget the jack block, get some color in there. And again, this kind of works for you because right now I'm just kind of spraying it in the direction that the sun would hit it. Some of the figure modelers do this where they'll spray paint a figure and then they'll spray a lighter color for the clothing or even the face, just to capture where the folds would naturally go and what shadows would get naturally created by the sunlight. You can do the same type of thing here. When you've got an area that's a little bit hard to get at, just give it a little, and that'll be fine. Again, there's going to be some weathering, other colors are going to go on top of that, so. But I think we're largely done for this, the third color. Don't forget to do the shirts and holders there. Just make sure you get a little paint on them. Try not to get too much overspray on the back. I think that looks pretty good. You just touch a few areas up on the top here. I think we are largely done. Oh, completely forgot the toolbox here. So the same type of thing, work your way down. Okay, so now we're at the final stage of modulating the base color, and that's doing the final highlight coat. So again, the final highlight coat is simply the Dunkelgelb 1944, late 1944, with some white mixed in, and the ratio is probably about 60% Dunkelgelb to 40% white. And so I have it pre-mixed here in one of these bottles. And now what we're going to do is we're just going to apply, but you're really going to be very selective of where you spray this. And you're going to spray it, for example, I'm going to spray it on the top of this fume extractor here, armored fume extractor. I might hit some of these access hatches here. I might do some of the lifting lugs. If there's like down here, these engine louver covers, hit the top of that, the top of the gun, the top, things that would catch the light naturally. So you're certainly not applying it as broad-based as you would the previous coats. And again, as you work from like the darkest coat up to the next color, to the next lightest color, to the last lightest color, you're actually applying less and less paint. Yeah, let's get spraying. Okay, so as mentioned, we're just going to start to hit the highlights. So the first thing I'm going to do is the top of this. I'm just going to build that up. Right, make that stand out. Maybe the hatches here. Right. Maybe the what else could we do? Maybe this hatch here, or latch rather. Maybe some of these. And you're just catching, you know, again, you don't have to be terribly precise because, again, with all the other effects that you're going to put on it, if there's any overspray or whatnot, that'll generally get covered up. But, see, that's what you never do, is spray first onto a model. So what I do is I just kind of wipe it out a bit. And then I might have to come back after this. I might have to come back and do this with one of the base colors to cover that up. But again, that's why you never spray first on the model. So I should listen to what I say. The top, we talked about the top of this panel here. All right, get that nice and bright. If we go to the side here, what we may want to do is you may just want to cover up the tops. Just give it a little touch along the top there. Right, just kind of feather it in very lightly, and then maybe hit the tops of these pistol ports. Right, top of that lifting lug, just work your way down. And you can see there's quite a graduation of color from lighter to dark as you work your way down here, and that's exactly the effect that we're looking for. All right, so we hit these guys a little bit more. These that stand out. Just look for other areas on the vehicle. Again, maybe on the other side, do the same thing, right? Just sort of walk it along the top. Feather it in, right? And then go back and hit. Right, hit that pistol port, hit that lug, just to give it a little bit of. Same thing back here. You may want to pay attention to the antenna. Well, this is giving me problems today. Maybe I need to thin out my paint a little bit. So just dab it. I barely see it. Okay, so we kind of clean out the there. So do the same type of thing here. Just walk it along the top, work your way down. All right, same thing along here. Maybe give that panel a little bit extra. All right, just get rid of that pistol port, work your way down. All right, gradually. Same thing along the mud guards. Just very lightly. Hit the top of that. Same thing along this back. Just hit that. And again, this is going to serve as a bit of a map for the rest of the colors to follow. And that is really all you need to do. And you're pretty much done. So that, I think, concludes what we need to do for the modular. So you notice I haven't even gone to the lighter color on the bottom part of the vehicle because there really isn't really much use to do that. Because that's going to get covered up with road wheels, and there's going to be a lot of weathering and whatnot, mud that we're going to put in there. So I think we're largely done with this. Maybe just hit a little bit. Here's the top. Again, there's the same thing with maybe these shirts and holders. Maybe these guys, because they stand proud out a bit, maybe just give them a little bit of attention. Same thing on this side, just to add a little bit of visual interest. Same thing, just side skirts on this side. And there you have it. I think we are largely done. Go back and blend some of the things I did earlier, some of the touch-ups I did earlier. And there you have it. So we've now completed getting the base color, the base Dunkelgelb color onto our Brummbar. We've modulated it. You see, it's a fairly stark and strong contrast, but that's exactly the effect that we're looking for. That'll very much subdue in later painting sessions and weathering sessions, filters, etc. But I think we're off to a good start with this particular project. So for the next time, what we're going to do is we're going to work with the camouflage colors, and those are going to be the wrought brown and the where did I bring it? And then the olive green. There we go. So these are the two colors that we're going to work with to start. And then we're going to apply those swatches on, and then we're going to add some light tones to them and modulate them in the same way. Maybe not as vigorously as what we've done with the base color, but we'll see. Everything will fit nicely together. So until next time, happy modeling. Thank you.